My name is Myron Ingram. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my own mother invited me into her living room under the excuse of a family discussion, only to corner me with 3 attorneys and demand I surrender the inheritance my father left behind. They thought I'd walk in alone. They expected me to freeze when the legal language started flying. They assumed the son they'd ignored for 2 decades would lower his eyes, pick up the pen, and quietly erase himself. They were wrong. But before I tell you how that day unfolded, you need to understand how I ended up standing in that room in the first place. It starts 25 years earlier, the day my parents' marriage collapsed. I was 7 when my world split clean down the middle. My father, Thomas Ingram, worked as a carpenter. He built cabinets, furniture, and a life with his hands. What he couldn't build was protection from my mother's legal team. He didn't have money for the kind of lawyers who win wars. When the divorce finalized, my mother kept the house and full custody. My dad was left with 2 weekends a month and the kind of silence that eats at a man over time. I still remember one Sunday evening when he dropped me back at my mother's place. He knelt on the porch, his rough hands steady on my shoulders, and told me no matter what anyone ever said, he would always be there. I didn't understand why his eyes were wet. I was too young to realize that was goodbye in slow motion. A year later, my mother remarried. Richard Porter entered our lives with tailored suits and his daughter from a previous marriage, Melissa. Overnight, our family reorganized itself around a structure where I existed on the margins. Richard never raised a hand to me. He never shouted. What he did was quieter and far more damaging. He behaved as if I were background noise. At dinners, my mother would proudly introduce her husband and Melissa as her daughter, then add my name like an afterthought. Each time, I learned to shrink a little more. Being invisible became survival. Invisible meant fewer comparisons, fewer reminders that Melissa excelled where I was merely adequate. But invisibility also meant disposable. The favoritism was systematic. When I was 16, I asked my mother for money to cover school textbooks. She looked at me like I'd asked for something extravagant and told me to go ask my father. That same week, Melissa received a brand new car for her birthday, complete with a bow and a family celebration. I started working after school, dishwashing, yard work, anything that paid. Every dollar felt like defiance. Richard noticed. One night, loud enough for me to hear, he told my mother I'd end up just like my father, doing labor no one respected. I didn't react, but the words lodged themselves deep. Graduation day should have been a win. I ranked at the top of my class in mathematics. I didn't expect applause from my family, and they delivered exactly that. They didn't even bother inviting relatives. The auditorium seats stayed empty, except for one man in the back row, wearing an old brown jacket that hung loose on his frame. My father. He clapped louder than anyone. Afterward, he slipped me an envelope and told me he'd been saving for my future. He asked me to keep it quiet. I did, for 14 years. Then came the phone call. Tuesday morning, just after 7, an unfamiliar number. An older man introduced himself as Harold Whitmore, my father's attorney. He told me my dad had passed away 3 days earlier. Heart failure, peaceful. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. 3 days. My father had been gone for 3 days, and no one in my family had said a word. Harold told me my mother had already been informed. Then he told me why he was calling. My father had left a will. I was the sole beneficiary. It didn't make sense. Dad lived modestly, drove an ancient truck, wore the same jacket for years. At Harold's office, surrounded by documents and proof, the truth surfaced. My father had sold his workshop long ago and invested carefully. Rental properties, savings, nearly $800,000. He chose a simple life, so I wouldn't have to struggle. Before I left, Harold handed me a sealed envelope in my father's handwriting. He told me not to open it until I needed it. He also warned me my mother was already asking questions. A week later, the calls began. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly found my number. They spoke of family, fairness, sharing. Then my mother called herself. Sweet voice, calculated concern. She insisted we talk as a family, reminded me of her years with my father. Implied cooperation would make everything easier. She scheduled the meeting for Saturday, and before that day arrived, she asked me to meet her for coffee. Just us, she said. She lied. She didn't come alone. Richard was already sitting there when I walked in. Richard was already sitting there when I walked into the cafe, arms folded tight across his chest like a guard blocking an entrance. My mother sat beside him, her face carefully arranged into an expression of wounded concern. She smiled when she saw me and pointed to the empty chair. Sit down, sweetheart. Richard thought it would be good to join us. You don't mind, do you? I did mind, but I sat. Richard didn't bother easing into it. He leaned forward, his cologne sharp and aggressive, invading my space. Let's skip the formalities. Your father's gone. He left you money. Good for you. But your mother spent years raising you. She deserves her share. Her share of what? I asked. The estate. He said it like it was obvious. We're thinking 70-30. You keep 30%. We'll draft the papers. Everyone walks away happy. I looked at my mother. She stared at the table. My father left everything to me. That was his decision. Richard laughed, short and dismissive. He's dead. His decisions don't matter anymore. Something in me went cold. They matter to me. His voice dropped, sharp now. 70-30. That's the deal. No. He blinked, genuinely stunned. Like refusal wasn't an option he'd considered. No, no. I stood. The will is legal. It's final. This conversation is done. As I headed for the door, his chair scraped loudly behind me. You're going to regret this, he said, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. You don't know who you're dealing with. I didn't turn around, but I memorized every word. After that, they stopped pretending. They didn't confront me directly. Instead, they unleashed the family. My phone became a weapon. Messages poured in accusing, shaming, condemning. My mother cried all night. Thomas would be ashamed of you. Family sticks together. You're selfish, ungrateful, cold. Then came the group messages. Someone wrote a long, emotional post painting me as a greedy son who manipulated his dying father and stole from his own mother. Comments stacked up fast. Insults, accusations, old photos of me shared with captions about betrayal. I saved everything, every text, every post, every threat. I didn't know why at the time. I just knew I needed to. Melissa messaged me once. You're destroying this family. Mom can't stop crying. Why are you doing this? I typed an answer, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I sent nothing. 2 weeks of silence followed. No calls, no messages, and somehow that silence was worse. Silence meant planning. The next call came midweek. My mother's voice had changed. No sweetness, no performance. We need a family meeting. Saturday, 2 o'clock, my house. What for? To talk about the future, about moving forward. There's a way to resolve this without courts, without lawyers, like a family. The way she said lawyers tightened my stomach. Too casual, too rehearsed. Fine, I said. Good, and come with an open mind. We just want what's best for everyone. I called Harold the second I hung up. He didn't hesitate. If she mentioned lawyers, she has them. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't lose your temper. That's what they want. I asked him if my father had seen this coming. Your father spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment, he said. He loved you, and he knew your mother better than anyone. That night, I finally opened the envelope my dad had left. His handwriting filled the page. He told me he knew this would happen. He confessed that during the divorce, my mother threatened to cut him out of my life completely. He signed everything away just to keep his weekends with me. He said it was his greatest regret, and he begged me not to make the same mistake. He wrote that everything was prepared, documents, evaluations, recordings, that Harold had it all, and that the money didn't matter nearly as much as my dignity. I sat in the dark with that letter pressed to my chest, realizing that even gone, my father was still protecting me. Friday morning, Harold laid everything out. The will, medical certifications, psychiatric evaluations, evidence of harassment, a USB drive full of proof. If they tried to claim my father wasn't competent, we were ready. If they played the victim, we had receipts. If you see lawyers tomorrow, text me one word, Harold said. I'll be close. Saturday, 5 minutes to 2. I pulled up outside my mother's house, my pulse hammering. Harold's car was parked 2 blocks away, just like he promised. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Clean, calm, and hiding a war inside. The house looked perfect from the outside. White siding, trimmed hedges, a lawn cut with military precision. The kind of place people called the American dream. I'd spent years trying to earn a place inside those walls. Standing there now, it felt like hostile ground. I stepped onto the porch. Before I could knock, the door flew open. My mother stood there with a smile stretched too wide to be real. You came. She leaned in for a hug. I didn't return it. Come inside. Everyone's waiting. Everyone turned out to be more than I expected. My mother and Richard claimed the main sofa like royalty. Aunt Linda sat stiffly on an armchair, eyes glued anywhere but me. Uncle Robert hovered by the window, arms crossed. Melissa lounged in the corner, scrolling her phone like this didn't concern her. And then there were 3 strangers at the dining table, 2 men in expensive suits and a woman with a leather briefcase. The table was cleared except for stacks of paperwork and a small digital recorder. My mother followed my gaze. This is Mr. Stevens and Mr. Martinez, our attorneys, and their legal assistant. Sit down, sweetheart. We have a lot to go over. I stayed standing. You said this was a family meeting. It is, Richard cut in smoothly. We're just making sure everything's properly documented. That's when it hit me. The papers, the recorder, the lawyers avoiding my eyes. This wasn't a discussion. It was a trap. And they were confident I'd walked into it alone. Stephen spoke first, calm and polished. We represent your mother regarding the estate of Thomas Ingram. It has come to our attention that the will naming you as sole beneficiary may be challenged. We have reason to believe Mr. Ingram lacked full mental capacity when he signed it. Witnesses are prepared to testify to his decline. Aunt Linda shifted, suddenly fascinated by the carpet. Martinez leaned forward. We could take this to probate court. Years of litigation, massive legal fees, nobody wins. Or we reach a family settlement. You voluntarily transfer 80% of the estate to your mother. You keep 20. Everyone moves on. 80%. More than Richard had demanded at the cafe. Greed had sharpened their appetite. You're asking me to give away $600,000. We're asking you to be reasonable. Stephen slid the papers toward me. Everything is prepared. The top page read, Voluntary Relinquishment of Inheritance Rights. My mother watched me like she was waiting for a verdict. Richard's smile was sharp with anticipation. Do we have a deal? Stevens asked. I flipped through the document slowly, then I smiled. That confused them. What's funny? Richard snapped, standing. You don't have a choice. You're a nobody with a nothing job who stumbled into money and forgot his place. Mom tried to interrupt. Richard waved her off. No, she needs to hear it. He pointed at me. You're just like your father. Stubborn, stupid. He died alone in a rundown house doing work nobody respected. That's your future. Aunt Linda nodded eagerly. He's right. You were always difficult. Always taking, Uncle Robert added. My mother dabbed at her eyes, tears right on cue. I raised you. I sacrificed everything. I gave you a home when your father abandoned you. He didn't abandon me. And this is how you repay us? By hoarding money that belongs to this family? Stevens cleared his throat. I strongly suggest you reconsider. With testimony about your father's mental state, this will is vulnerable. Sign now and end this gracefully. I looked around the room, at practiced tears, at rage barely contained, at relatives who taught me how to disappear as a child. They'd prepared everything except one thing. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I said calmly, I think I'll get another opinion. I sent a single word. Richard laughed. What are you doing? Texting for help. No one's coming. I wouldn't be so sure. 2 minutes passed in suffocating silence. Smiles cracked. Confidence drained. Then the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said. Before anyone could stop me, I opened the door. Harold Whitmore stood on the porch in a charcoal suit, leather briefcase in hand, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Good afternoon. I hope I'm not late. He stepped inside. The room changed instantly. Stephen straightened. Martinez's smirk vanished. My mother went pale. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold said evenly, I'm a licensed estate attorney in California. I represented Thomas Ingram for 25 years. I now represent his son. Richard protested, but Harold was already opening his briefcase. You have concerns about the will. I'm happy to address them. He laid out documents, a USB drive, a sealed envelope. My mother stared like they might bite. Let's begin with competency, Harold said, sliding a report across the table. Psychiatric evaluation conducted 8 weeks before Thomas Ingram's death. Full cognitive assessment. He was fully competent. Any court will accept this. Aunt Linda shrank into her chair. Next, the will. Executed in full compliance with California law. Witnessed. Notarized. Airtight. He looked at Martinez. Probate court would be delightful. We'd win, then countersue. My mother's voice cracked. Surely we can be reasonable. We are being reasonable, Harold replied. Reason says you have no standing. Reason says the will stands. Reason says my client inherits everything his father intended. The trap had snapped shut, and this time it wasn't on me. Stevens raised a hand, trying to slow the collapse. Mr. Whitmore, let's not rush. Maybe there's a compromise. There is no compromise. Harold's eyes moved calmly from face to face. Thomas Ingram spent 20 years preparing for this moment. He knew exactly who would come for his child's inheritance, and he made sure they would fail. No one spoke. Harold placed the USB drive on the table. This contains 47 text messages, 23 recorded phone calls, and 15 social media posts, all documenting a coordinated harassment campaign against my client. Threats, defamation, emotional abuse, every one of them traced back to people in this room. Aunt Linda went pale. Uncle Robert shifted, suddenly unsure where to stand. California Civil Code 1708.7, stalking and harassment. Civil Code sections 45 and 46, defamation and slander. Harold's voice never rose. An intentional infliction of emotional distress. If this proceeds to court, Mrs. Porter, I won't just defend the will. I'll file counterclaims. I'll subpoena phone records, social media accounts, private messages, everything from the past 3 months. Richard slammed his hand down. This is insane. We're family. I can sue family, and I will. Harold didn't blink. The evidence is overwhelming. My mother turned to Stevens, panic breaking through her composure. Do something. Stevens gathered his papers slowly. The confidence drained from his face. Mrs. Porter, I think we need to reevaluate. He glanced at Martinez. We should continue privately. That would be wise. Harold nodded. And while you're reevaluating, consider this. Thomas Ingram recorded conversations. including one from 2001 when Mrs. Porter threatened to erase him from his child's life unless he surrendered every marital asset. My mother gasped. The room fractured. Stevens and Martinez stood up immediately, packing their files with the urgency of men who wanted distance. We recommend you seek other counsel. They were gone moments later. Aunt Linda started crying for real this time. Diane, you told us he was confused, that he didn't know what he signed. Shut up. My mother snapped, her mask finally gone. Uncle Robert stepped forward, uncertainty in his voice. You said Thomas abandoned you, that he walked away from you and my nephew. He did abandon us. I have the recording. Harold reached for his briefcase. No, she screamed. Don't. Get out. Both of you. Get out of my house. Melissa stood frozen on the stairs, horror written across her face. Mom, what did you do? There was no answer. There couldn't be. The truth had filled the room, and there was nowhere left for lies to hide. We drove in silence before I finally spoke. Thank you. It felt too small. I just delivered what your father prepared, Harold said quietly. My phone buzzed. Messages from relatives, apologies, regret, confusion. Harold nodded when I showed him. The truth rearranges loyalties. That night, we discussed next steps. Change locks, install more cameras, document everything. They won't accept this quietly, Harold warned, especially Richard. He lost control in front of everyone. Legally, they can't touch you, but not all danger is legal. Your father understood that. That's why the security system is active. Cloud backups, motion sensors, I have access. 2 weeks passed, silence. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like waiting for impact. I began spending nights at my father's house, sorting through his life. Every drawer felt like a conversation. Old photos, tools, a faded mug that read, World's Best Dad. Then one night, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front yard. A dark pickup idled at the curb, headlights off. I recognized it instantly. Richard's truck. It sat there for 15 minutes before pulling away. Harold told me to call the police. Create a record. The officer wasn't concerned. No crime committed. The next morning, Melissa messaged me. He's been drinking. He says you humiliated him. That you'll pay. I saved it. At 3:07 a.m., another alert jolted me awake. Front porch. 2 figures in dark clothing, one carrying a red container, gasoline. I watched as liquid splashed along the porch railing, across the steps, soaking the wood my father had built with his own hands. And in that moment, I understood. The war wasn't over, it had just turned dangerous. The security feed showed 2 silhouettes near the hedges. One of them stood guard, head snapping side to side, whispering urgently. The other flicked open a lighter. My fingers were already shaking as I dialed 911. Someone is trying to set my house on fire, I said. 742 Maple Street. It's on camera. The flame hit the porch. Orange light exploded across the wood, crawling up the railing my father had built years ago with his own hands. For a split second, I thought I was about to watch everything he left me disappear. Then, the sprinklers came alive. Jets of water burst from hidden nozzles, drenching the porch in seconds. I hadn't even known they existed until Harold once mentioned my dad's overthinking. Now they were saving the house. On screen, the 2 figures froze. Panic, confusion, then they bolted. They ran straight toward a pickup parked down the block. The camera caught the license plate perfectly as they sped away. I stayed on the phone with emergency services until the sirens cut through the night. 7 minutes later, fire trucks arrived. By then, the flames were dead. The porch was damaged, blackened, ruined, but the house still stood. So did I. The police reviewed the footage. One officer leaned closer to the screen, eyes widening. We know that truck, he said quietly. We'll have them within the hour. The police station at 4 in the morning felt hollow, washed in buzzing fluorescent light. Harold sat beside me while officers drifted through the corridors like shadows. At around 4:30, a detective finally approached us. He was broad-shouldered, exhausted, and carried himself like a man who'd seen too much. We made 2 arrests, he said. Richard Porter and Diane Porter. I expected Richard's name. I wasn't ready for my mother's. They were picked up at their home. Richard's clothes still reeked of gasoline. My mother had been trying to erase messages from her phone when officers arrived. They didn't get far, the detective added, opening a folder. We recovered everything. Messages, plans, timing, strategy. She wasn't dragged into it. She helped design it. Harold's hand tightened around my shoulder. Do you want to see them? The detective asked gently. You don't have to. Every logical part of me said no. Go home. Let the system do its job. Don't reopen old wounds. But another part of me spoke louder. The child who watched her father break. The teenager who learned she didn't matter. The woman who refused to give up what was hers. Yes, I said. I do. Behind the one-way glass, my mother looked nothing like the woman who raised me. Her makeup had smeared. Her blouse was stained. She looked small, unfamiliar. She's my daughter, she told the detective, her voice cracking. I'd never hurt my daughter. But she already had. She tried to burn down the last thing my father left me. The trial stretched over 4 months and felt endless. The evidence crushed any doubt. Video footage, gas receipts tied to Richard's card, witnesses, text messages spelling out everything. Richard testified first. His lawyer framed him as a desperate man, drowning financially, pushed to the edge. The inheritance, he argued, would have saved him. The jury didn't care about desperation. They cared about fire, guilty, first-degree arson, conspiracy. 10 years. My mother's defense tried a different angle. She was afraid, controlled, manipulated. Her own words destroyed that story. If we can't have the money, she doesn't get to keep the house. Burn it. Guilty. When the sentence was read, she turned toward me. Her eyes were hollow. Her lips formed words I recognized instantly. You'll regret this. The same threat. Every time. I didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, Harold walked me to my car. How do you feel? He asked. I searched for the answer. I don't feel victorious, I said. I just feel empty. That's normal, he replied softly. But your father would be proud. Something shifted then. Not relief, not peace, but space. Enough to breathe. So let me ask you something real. Should I forgive my mother? Some people say blood excuses everything. Others say some lines erase the word family forever. What do you think? If you've ever had to choose yourself over someone who was supposed to love you, you're not alone. She didn't call to ask for forgiveness. I know I was part of what hurt you, she said quietly. I saw how they treated you. I stayed silent. I didn't defend you, and that makes me responsible too. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to understand how much of me is really mine, and how much was shaped by them. I don't want to become her. That's good, I said honestly, and I meant it. Could we try again? She asked. Not as sisters, just two people who share a past. I took a long breath. We can try, I said. 6 months after the trial, Harold asked me to meet him at my father's house one last time. Thomas wanted you to see this, he explained as we stood in what used to be Dad's workshop, the space he'd turned into a study after selling his business. He said not to open it until everything settled. Harold walked to the built-in shelves and pressed a spot I would never have noticed. A panel shifted open with a soft click. Inside was a hand-carved wooden box, polished smooth, glowing warmly under the light. The kind of box my father used to make for clients he truly respected. He spent 3 months on it, Harold said softly. Told me it was the most important thing he ever built. My hands shook as I opened it. Photographs, so many of them. Me at 7, smiling with missing teeth. Me at 12, holding a math trophy. Me at 18, graduation cap crooked on my head. Me at 25, shaking hands with my first engineering supervisor. Every photo had writing on the back, my father's handwriting. Myra, age 7, the day I had to leave, I promised myself I'd find my way back. Myra, age 12, I sat in the back of the auditorium. You didn't see me. I saw you. Myra, age 25, I drove 3 hours just to watch you walk into that building. My daughter, the engineer. I've never been prouder. The final photo was recent. Me standing outside my apartment, taken from across the street. The note read, "The money is just paper. These moments are what matter. This is what I'm really leaving you. Proof that I was always there, that I always loved you, even when you didn't know." I pressed the box to my chest and cried the way I never had before. A year has passed since the trial. I live in my father's house now, our house. I left his workshop exactly as it was, the scent of sawdust, the tools lined up perfectly, the workbench where he built things with patience and care. Some evenings I sit there with a cup of tea and talk to him. Maybe he hears me, maybe he doesn't. Either way, it helps. The inheritance stays mostly untouched. I still work my engineering job. I still drive the same sensible car. My father believed wealth was about stability, not spectacle. Now I do too. My mother is still incarcerated. She sends letters. I don't open them. That isn't cruelty. It's protection. Harold helped me understand the difference. Richard won't be eligible for release for several more years. I have a permanent restraining order waiting for the day he gets out. Melissa visits sometimes. We aren't close. We may never be. But we aren't strangers anymore either. She's building her own life away from our parents' shadow. I respect that. I no longer attend the family gatherings I once dreaded. Not out of anger, but because I've learned that obligation isn't love, and biology isn't loyalty. I have dinner with my uncle once a month. My aunt sends holiday cards. These small chosen connections mean more to me than all the forced togetherness of my childhood. I'm not angry anymore. Anger demands too much energy, and I've found better places to spend mine. But I'm not naive either. I know what people are capable of when money is involved. I know what my own mother was willing to do. I won't forget. I just won't let it define me. Sometimes I stand on the rebuilt front porch, crafted exactly the way my father designed it, and look down the street where everything nearly ended. I think about the fire, The sprinklers activating like his hand reaching across time, the cameras he installed, the planning of a man who understood some people don't stop until they've taken everything or destroyed what they can't have. He didn't just leave me money. He left me protection. He left me boundaries. He left me permission. Permission to say no. Permission to walk away. Permission to refuse love that comes with conditions and price tags attached. I used to believe family meant enduring anything. That blood demanded forgiveness no matter the cost. My father taught me otherwise, not with speeches, but with 20 years of quiet love, careful preparation, and patience that asked for nothing in return. If you see yourself in this story, if you've ever been made to feel small by the people meant to lift you up, if you've been called selfish for protecting yourself, let me tell you what I learned. You do not owe anyone your dignity. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. Love should feel safe, not transactional. And boundaries aren't walls meant to shut people out. They're doors, so you get to choose who comes in. My father left me a house. He left me money, but his real inheritance was something far greater. He left me the right to stand tall, and I will never give that away again. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family? If you want more stories about boundaries, justice, and finding your voice, subscribe and explore the others linked below. I'll see you next time.